So my favorite character from Regular Show has always been Skips. First of all, he's played by the legendary Mark Hamill, which I honestly didn't know up until recently. And I was surprised to find out because Mark Hamill is easily one of the most iconic and legendary voice actors to ever live. I mean, this is the Joker we're talking about.
I'm crazy enough to take on Batman, but the IRS? No, thank you.
Skips is the park's groundkeeper, and he's always willing to help Mordecai and Rigby with whatever silly, goofy shenanigans they get into.
I'll kill you!
Now, the reason Skips is their go-to guy for these situations is because he, for whatever reason, has knowledge of how to deal with really anything that they come across in their blatant neglect and disregard for their job. Now, this always leads to the question of just exactly how Skips has this knowledge, and the answer they've always given in the early seasons is that Skips is immortal. He's been around since the 18th century, and therefore he has seen a bunch of things throughout the years. Well, that was the case, and so we finally got a glimpse into Skips' backstory with the Season 5 Episode 22 episode titled Skips' Story. And I believe this episode was not only among the most boring I've ever seen from Regular Show, but also completely ruined Skips as a character for me. So let's talk about it. The episode starts with Mordecai and Rigby helping Skips fix the roof of the park house, which is super surprising that they're actually doing their job. They start asking him about his immortality and how he obtained it, and that's when we're thrusted back in time to where Skips tells his story. We see a young Skips, who at this point is named Walks, getting transferred to a new school, where Headmaster Bennett, who looks and sounds like Benson for some reason, tells us that Walks has been expelled 3 times this year due to fighting. He then has Gareth show him to where his locker is, where he is introduced to the Immortal Student Council. Now, these guys are being bullied by Clorkbane. Walks doesn't like this and they get into a scuffle, where Clorkbane says,
"This isn't over."
Walks then goes to lunch where he meets Mona, a woman who asks Walks if he would like to sit with her, and it's very clear that Walks is flustered and a bit nervous when talking to this beautiful young lady. This is when the council interrupts them and asks Walks if he's willing to fight Clorkbane. Now, by the time he turns around, Mona is leaving, and when Walks catches up to her, she says this.
Not into men who fight.
Now, this is one of the first things that doesn't make any sense to me. Clorkbane is a known bully who preys on the weak and innocent because he's immortal. And instead of being proud of him for standing up to Clorkbane or worried about Walks fighting him, her whole point is, I don't like men who fight, which is strange. Because she never needs a man to defend her if it's needed? I mean, who realistically acts like this? But, moving on. Walks eventually meets with the student council and tells them that he will fight Clorkbane as long as it doesn't interfere with his time with Mona. This is his only condition, the one thing he wants. We then get a montage of Walks and Mona spending time together, and the student council creating the Fists of Justice so that Walks can defeat Clorkbane. This is also where Walks learns to skip, as he skips around the school with Mona. At this point, we're more than halfway through the episode, and it's been nothing but a complete snooze fest. Nothing interesting, nothing exciting. Just a boring, cheesy, bland love story. But more on that later. Prom time comes around, and Walks picks up Mona from her parents' house and takes her to the prom. They're having a good time right up until the clock passes 8, which was when Walks was supposed to fight Clorkbane. An impatient Clorkbane now busts down the wall and calls out Walks. That's right, folks. We have a whole 5 minutes left, and we finally get something somewhat interesting. So, Clorkbane comes smashing in, throws Mona and Bennett to the ground, and finally, after all that unnecessary effort, Mona gives Walks the go-ahead to fight. Wow. All that time wasted just for her to be okay with him fighting in the end anyways. So the fight officially gets underway and Walks is getting completely whooped to the point where he is almost killed until Mona shoves him out of the way and this happens. Mona! Yep, they killed her. She is dead and her ass is not coming back to life. Is it messed up that this was the most enjoyable part of the episode for me? Anyways, this is where Walks first gets the Fist of Justice and knocks Clorkbane right into the stratosphere. Now, Walks is pretty sad, obviously, because his little girlfriend died, and that's pretty much it. After this, Walks decides to become immortal to fight Clorkbane whenever he returns, and is reborn as Skips in memory of Mona, blah blah blah, who cares. Okay, now that snooze fest is over, I think Rigby really sums up best how I feel about this entire episode.
I'm sorry, Skips, but
Skips is completely ruined in this episode. He's shown as a fancy aristocrat who spends all his time adventuring and fighting, which is a far cry from our Skips, who is literally just a regular guy. This version is so over the top, shy, nervous, his emotions are all over the place, and it just feels like very rushed character development. Like they're trying to flesh all of this out in 22 minutes, and it just feels very sloppy. Now I want to talk about this one. Mona is such an obnoxious character. She doesn't want Skips to fight at all, which is just stupid. I think we all know sometimes you just can't use your words. And it doesn't matter anyways, because at the end she was okay with the fighting. She gets about a whole 5 minutes of screen time. Anyways, what bothers me the most is that Skips only knew her for like a week at the most. And the majority of that time, she just spent prattling on about prom. It just doesn't seem like she was important at all. Her greatest moment was her death, which these people are in high school, and we see Mona's parents before prom, and then they're never mentioned again. Like, did Skips not keep up with them? Did not contact them? Like, he was the last person to see their daughter alive. Overall, she just feels like a very bland and rushed character. Now, onto the immortal babies. Why couldn't Gareth fight Clorgbane? It's never explained. Why couldn't they schedule the fight for literally any other time besides prom, when Skips specifically said as long as it doesn't interfere with his time with Mona, he'll fight Clorgbane? It doesn't make sense. Like, none of this makes sense, and I genuinely felt confused after watching this episode. It just feels like this was a bad idea from the start that was just executed even worse. Skip's backstory isn't something that we needed to be explained or explored. And if they did, why not show us an actual adventure? Or our standard regular show episode from Skip's perspective, so we understand why he understands what Mordecai and Rigby go through. Why did it have to be a poorly written love story? I think it takes a lot of the appeal that I have for Skips and makes him a sad man who never got over the death of his girlfriend. It just feels very odd and out of place for Skips' character as a whole. I just think that they could have executed this idea in a much better way. To sum it up, this is just a very boring, bland, and unenjoyable episode. I understand what they were doing with the whole forever young love story, but Mona especially was not fleshed out enough to make her death hold any significance to us as a viewer. The pacing was slow, and the only interesting part was in the last 5 minutes. This idea could have been executed way better, but instead, what we're left with is a bad attempt at a love story. Well, that's all I have for you guys today. Let me know what you guys think of this episode and these characters and how they act in this episode in the comments below. I'm genuinely interested to see if I'm the only one who thinks this. And if you enjoyed the video, go ahead and drop a like, drop a sub, all that good stuff that inspires me to make more of these. And I will see everybody in the next episode. Dusty out.